All right, testing, testing. 1, 2, 3. Just kidding. Ladies and gentlemen, what's up? I have a really, really interesting guest. I know I say that every episode because it's true, but today is it's really special. So I'm a big fan of, as you know, is sales tactics, psychology, behavioral psychology, things like this. And today it's right up that alley. Today I have Terry Tucker. He's a former SWAT hostage negotiator. And we're going to dive a lot into what he did, tactics, methodology, strategies. And I also want to share a different perspective by just kind of clarifying things on his end and how I use them in sales in my career, but also in just the everyday lifestyle and how you can use them for just overall better communication. And who knows where the conversation goes. But Terry, welcome to the show. Glad to have you here.
Well, thanks for having me on, Enrique. I think this is going to be fun. I'm looking forward to talking with you.
Yeah, let's nerd out, man. Let's nerd out. So real quick, tell us about yourself. Give us the condensed, brief version on who you are.
Sure. Born and raised on the south side of Chicago. You can't tell this from looking at me or from my voice, but I'm 6'8" tall, and I played college basketball at the Citadel in Charleston, South Carolina. I'm really going to date myself now, but after I graduated, I moved home to find a job. This was long before the internet was available to help people find employment. Fortunately, I found that first job in the corporate headquarters of Wendy's International, the hamburger chain, in their marketing department. Unfortunately, I lived with my parents for the next 3.5 years, as helped my mom care for my father and my grandmother, who were both dying of different forms of cancer. Professionally, as I said, started out at Wendy's, became a hospital administrator after that, then made a major pivot in my life and became a police officer. And the two cool jobs, I guess, that I had during that were, one, and you're going to laugh at this, I was an undercover narcotics investigator at 6'8" tall. And two, as you mentioned, excuse me, I was a SWAT team hostage negotiator. This was with the Cincinnati, Ohio Police Department. After I got out of law enforcement, I started my own school security consulting business, coached girls high school basketball, wrote a book in 2020, made the brilliant business decision to start a motivational speaking business right as COVID hit. So probably everybody will dismiss everything I say from here on out because I made that dumb decision. But for the last almost 11 years now, I've been battling a rare form of cancer. And then finally, my wife and I have been married for 30 years. We have one child, a daughter, who's a graduate of the United States Air Force Academy and is an officer in the new branch of the military, the Space Force.
Oh, right on. Very new branch of military.
Yeah.
What is she doing over there? Because I don't think anybody knows too much about Space Force.
She can't tell us. It's all top secret stuff that she does. It involves satellites, it involves radars, it involves tracking things in space and things like that. So it's very top secret. I have no idea what she does.
That's pretty cool. That's badass. That's what a hell of a conversation opener. Oh, I'm in Space Force. Really? What do you do? It's confidential. Don't ask.
It is. I mean, and her husband flies a top secret aircraft that she has the highest top secret clearance of anybody in the military, but she's not allowed inside her husband's aircraft. So can you imagine the two of them? Thank God they both have top secret clearance and they can talk to each other, you know?
Very interesting dynamic there.
Yeah.
Well, so bring me up to speed. Like you were a police officer. Like, how do you even transition from a regular police officer to SWAT and more so like the actual hostage negotiating? Like, bring up to speed on that transition and why you chose that specific like department, if you will, hostage negotiation specifically.
So in Cincinnati and in most, whether it's a police department, sheriff's department, whatever, SWAT is broken down usually into two groups. One are the tactical officers, and those are the ones with all the cool toys, the guns, the Bearcat that is armored and all that kind of stuff. And then there's the negotiators. And if the negotiators do their job, then the tactical team doesn't get to use all their little tools and stuff like that, their little toy and that. So that's how SWAT is kind of configured in most law enforcement agencies. The other thing about SWAT is that they're usually the best officers, they get the best training, and they get the best equipment. So I've always been a person who's wanted to be associated with the best. So I was already a police officer in Cincinnati. I was in the drug unit when I joined the SWAT team, and we were not a full-time SWAT team. It's not like we did this full-time. And again, I'm going to date myself really big now. We carried pagers at the time. And so when there was an event, or, we were going after somebody, or there was a search warrant that needed SWAT to kick in the door, and that, our pagers would go off, and we would call in, determine whether we were going to we had enough people that not everybody had to go at a different event. And so that's kind of how we operated. So whenever there was and it always seemed to happen in threes. There was always call outs that happened in threes. It wasn't like you got one and then you had some downtime. They were always happening in threes. And secondly, we were always called out in the middle of the night. I mean, these things rarely happened at, 10 o'clock in the morning or something like that. It was always, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 2 in the morning, whatever, that you would get called out. So that's kind of how SWAT was configured. The negotiators, I applied. They had an opening on the negotiating team. I applied for it, had to do physical fitness, run so many miles, do so many push-ups and sit-ups. There was the meeting with the psychologist to, talk about what you would do in the job. We had to take all kinds of written tests. We had to meet with the people who would be in charge of us on scene. And then the team voted. And it was one of those things where it was a unanimous thing, or you didn't get on. So if everybody on the team, except one person, said, yeah, we want Tucker on the team, then it was like, sorry, you're not going to be on the team. So everybody had to be in agreement, because we were a pretty close-knit group. I mean, there was a movie back in the 1990s that Samuel L. Jackson played. It was called The Negotiator. And Samuel L. Jackson was like this Superman guy who did like everything. And I always get the question, is that the way it's like? Is that the way it occurs? No, that's absolutely not the way it occurs. Yes, there is one person negotiating with whoever we're after, but then there's also another negotiator sitting right next to that person with headphones on, listening to everything that's happening. And then there's numerous other people that are doing what I used to call working the crowd. Why are we here? What's going on? So as a negotiator, you may get a note from your secondary who's sitting next to you that says, don't talk about his mother. Because the people working the crowd will be like, he had a big fight with his mother and he grabbed a gun and now he's barricaded in his room.
Let's pause right there for a second. Help me understand. So you got people working the crowd. Are they gathering more intel on the scenario, and then that guy relays it to the secondhand guy? Like, what's that process look like? That structure?
Yeah, I mean, the secondary person is there to listen and to potentially send, just write you notes. We had little Post-it notes that we had with it, right here, ask this question, or did you think about this? And maybe send you in a different direction, because, sometimes you get fixated and you go down a rabbit hole, and it's not the rabbit hole. There were hours sometimes where we would spend 2, 3, 4 hours over here talking about something with the individual, when the real problem was over here. And we hadn't built up the trust of that person enough to have them tell us why we were really there.
I want to pause right there too, and just kind of relate to like what I do, because it's, I can relate to that in a sense, because sales is my career, of course, and I do a lot of, coaching and things of that manner. And it's relatable in the way of, I'm not there in the moment with them on the sales call, but when they send me the recording and I review it with them, I'm with them side by side, walking them through. And I always look at the first 10 minutes of the conversation, because that's usually where problems start or things get missed, right? They go down the wrong avenue for too long, the wrong rabbit hole. And I pause and I show them, hey, look, if you clarified on this, it would have led you to this. And as a result, you wouldn't have got hit with that objection down the road. So it's kind of similar in that aspect too, where it's like you got a second person listening in to show you a different perspective, to pursue the narrative, or to go in the right direction, to go through the right doors. So I just want to point that out there, but go ahead, continue on. So
no, you're absolutely right. I mean, we do this as a team, I mean, it's kind of like, if anybody watched the Ohio State Georgia football game, on right before New Year's, and well, the Ohio State kicker missed the field goal, and Ohio State didn't go to the national championship game. It's the kicker's fault. No, this is a team game. This is a team. It's not one person, just because somebody missed a field goal. Okay, fine. Did you miss that pass? Did you not get that tackle? No, this is a team game. So it's not one person responsible for the entire thing. So yeah, absolutely. So we would start out, kind of humanizing ourselves. It'd be like, hey, I'm Terry. Sometimes I'd say, what's your name? Or sometimes I would say, what do you want me to call you? Because people don't want to give their name, especially if it's, like a homicide suspect or something like that we found out was in an apartment. So we surrounded it. Now we're trying to get them out. What do you want me to call you? And the other thing we would talk about was fairness, and so we would say something like, hey, Enrique, look, we're going to have this discussion. We're going to talk to each other. But you know what? I want you to, if there's ever a time where you don't think I'm treating you fairly, I want you to say that to me. I want you to say, wait a minute, Terry, I don't think you're being fair with me here, because I'm going to do everything I can to correct that. Because if it's sales, as you probably know, if the other person, if you're trying to make a deal with somebody and they don't feel you're treating them fairly, you're not going to make that deal. If they don't walk away feeling good about themselves. So fairness is an incredibly important thing. But I think the overarching umbrella over everything we did was trust. The person had to trust us. And we never, people may think this is interesting because I get this question a lot, like, really? We never lied to people. So people are like, you never lied to anyone. No, we never did. So if somebody would say to us, and they would occasionally, hey, look, I'll come out, I'll put the gun down, I'll let the hostage go, whatever it was, but you got to promise me I'm not going to go to jail. And we would have to say, I'm sorry, but when you do come out, you are going to go to jail. And then we would try to deflect the conversation to something more positive in that regard. So anyway, I'm sure you got questions, so go ahead.
Yeah. Well, there's so much I want to kind of uncover, and there's so much that we can talk about, but I'm generally curious from a sales perspective, like what your top end of the process looks like introduction, like the connecting phase of like having the conversation. Because I mentioned we call it pre-frame in sales. I'm not sure if you have a specific label for it in your process, but it's almost like you have a pre-frame that's centered around fairness, which in doing so, like having that pre-frame, like, yes, you set an expectation, but it's a good way to build trust, of course, but being on the same side of the table, which is, I'm guessing, the main intention of that pre-frame. Correct me if I'm wrong. But tell me, like, walk me through like the top of the process. Like, I don't know, maybe first 5-10 minutes, like what you typically say, whether it's pre-frame and like the intention on why you do it, and also like the outcome, like what you kind of expect from doing it, if that makes sense.
Sure, absolutely. And so, the first thing you do, you just don't sit down and put the headphones on and start talking. You want to get as much data, as much intel as you possibly can before you go in there. So you want to know everything you possibly can. Sometimes we did. Sometimes we had no idea. Sometimes we would get a tip that, like I said, there was a homicide suspect in this apartment. So, okay, what's he wanted for? What's his record like? Is this a, third strike where this guy's going to prison for the rest of his life? Or is this, maybe he's got a life after this? What information do we know about him? I'm going to say him or her, but I'll be honest with you. I want to say in the 5 years I did this, I don't think I ever negotiated with a woman. It was always a man. So and I don't mean to be sexist about that, but that's just the way it ended up being.
Makes sense. Yeah, I could assume that it'd probably be guys that do stupid shit like that.
So we get as much information, we set up, we're good. At the time I was doing this is many years ago, most people had landlines. So we had a technical group that worked with us, and they would take down your landline. So you couldn't call out. You couldn't get to somebody. People had cell phones, but they weren't nearly the way it is today, where like nobody has a landline and everybody has a cell phone. In all honesty, I don't know how they do that. I don't think they do anything to take down the cell phone or take down the tower. Too many people would be affected by that. So now we've got to have a communication device with the person. Sometimes it's over a PA where it's like, hey, pick up your phone. We want to talk to you. Hey, and this could go on for 2 or 3 hours where we're like talking to ourselves, and you feel like an idiot because you're out in the middle of a neighborhood, and you've pulled the armored car literally up to somebody's front door. You're on their front lawn and you're talking, pick up the phone. We want to talk to you. Pick up the phone. And if they didn't have a phone, we would use a throw phone. And we had a phone that would just ring with us. They couldn't dial out. They couldn't get another number. And this cord was maybe a mile and a half long. So we could be blocks away. So the tactical team would put it on the front porch and we would get on the PA. Hey, there's a phone on the front porch. Just pick it up. We just want to talk to you. So once we established communications, it depended. You really kind of took the clue for how the person went. First of all, you want to humanize yourself. Hi, I'm Terry. No, okay, this is a person now. It's not, hey, I'm Officer Tucker. We never did that. So it wasn't, this is a cop talking to me. No, I'm Terry.
Yeah.
What do you want me to call you? You know, and sometimes they're like, don't worry about that. Okay, no problem. Hey, how are you doing today? So the first thing we would start out, let me back up. We would use that. Hey, look, okay, listen, I need to talk to you, but I want you to understand that I want you to feel like you're being treated fairly. So anytime when we're talking where you don't think I'm being honest with you, where you don't think you can trust, and again, this is rapport building. This is that sort of tactical empathy that you and I were talking about earlier, that Chris Voss talks about, you know, to get the person to understand that I understand what you're going through. So, hey, anytime you don't feel I'm treating you fairly, then I want you to stop whatever we're doing and you call me out on it. The other part of this is your tone of voice. You know, Voss talks about sort of the late night DJ voice where you get real low and you talk real slow and you do that. And that works. I mean, if somebody's hyped up, that works. And if you think about what we do, we've all been to the park as a kid, you know, played on the teeter-totter, the seesaw, you know. When we start negotiating with somebody, their emotional side is way up in the air and their rational side is down on the ground. Over time, by asking them open-ended questions, by labeling, by mirroring, and we can talk about those here in a minute, we try to get them to where that teeter-totter or seesaw is at equilibrium. And then over more time, their rational brain is up in the air and their emotional brain is down on the ground. Now, in the first hours, we'll never say something like, hey, why don't you come out? Or why don't you put the gun down? Or why don't you, because we haven't built that trust. We haven't built that rapport. We haven't gotten that technical empathy with them. So we never ask that. We ask that at the end when their rational brain has been engaged, because we all make better decisions when we're using our rational brain as opposed to using our emotional brain.
Mm-hmm. So first step is like kind of normalizing, gaining rapport, trust, decompressing what's on their mind.
Exactly. Slowing things down.
Yeah.
That's why you use sort of that late night DJ voice where
Yeah.
you okay in there? Yeah.
Tonality is massive in sales and even outside of sales. It's so important because in sales, when we decompress, typically it's like when it's that time of the call where they know that they have to take out their card and pay, right? Like objection handling. At that point in the call, that's when they kind of have that self-anxiety because they know where they're at in the call. And it's just the same thing. Like the first objection, typically, look, that's not a problem at all. And then I just clarify whatever the objection was. But it's the fact that tonality is always massively important. It's a direct effect on somebody and how they're feeling, hands down. But how do you, so you set in that frame, right? You have the conversation, like what's next?
So now, as I said, you know, we're starting to negotiate. Their emotional end is way up in the air. Their rational brain way down on the ground. So what we want them to do is burn off a lot of that emotional energy. So we just basically ask them open-ended questions. And we use what and how questions predominantly. We try to stay away from questions that are like why, because why sounds accusatory. Why'd you do that, Enrique? Oh, wait a minute. You know, so we try to stay away from why. Tell me what's going on here. What got us here today? And then we be quiet and we let them talk. and we burn off that energy. And whatever they say, usually it's the important words. Sometimes it's the last 3 to 4 words. We'll just parrot that again. You might say, well, my mom just pissed me off. And we'd say, your mom pissed you off. And then we shut up. And that'll get people to talk again.
Why do you ask that question like that right there?
Like what? Like just say it like that?
Yeah. Like that type of question is a mirroring question, right? For the people who are listening. Tell us a bit more about like mirroring question and then why you would ask that.
Because again, we're trying to establish trust. We're trying to establish a relationship. And by me parroting back, so we used to call it parroting, they call it mirroring now, but by us parroting back what you said, or the last 3 or 4 words, or the important words of what you said, it establishes trust, because it makes them realize, oh, he understands what I'm saying. And all we do is take those words and give them right back to you. But it makes you feel as the hostage taker that, oh, he gets me. He understands. This is not like, oh, he's eating an orange here and oh yeah, right, okay. I mean, we've connected. It gets that bond going. And it's so simple. And I'm sure people are listening. It's like, it's not that simple. It is that simple. It's just the way people are wired. But so, the important thing to do is to ask those 3 questions and then to shut up. That's the hard part. We use silence to our advantage. So people would talk, we would parrot back to them their 3 words, and then we'd be quiet. Maybe they wouldn't talk for a minute or 2. Now it's uncomfortable. If you and I sat here for a minute and we didn't say a word, it would get uncomfortable. Somebody, your audience would be like, somebody say something. Come on, say something.
Someone's going to lean in.
Yeah, somebody's got to say something. Somebody's got to keep, no, use the silence to your benefit. Use that, and we would just be quiet. And eventually the silence would get to them and they would start talking again. Yeah. And it's like, they talk to my mom burned the dinner. So your mom burned the dinner. Quiet, silence, wouldn't say anything. But the other part of this is labeling. And so we would parrot back and we would attach an emotion to it. So it seems like, or it feels like, you're really upset with your mother. But here's the important part of that labeling. If somebody's ranting and raving and yelling and screaming, and you say something like, you seem like you're a little upset with your mother, you've totally missed it. You have to, and this is why negotiating, at least from our perspective, was so exhausting, because you had to get down in the weeds with these people. You had to get down in the mud. You had to be like, well, Enrique, sounds like you're just pissed as hell at your mother. Boom, another connection. Oh, Terry gets it. Terry gets it. I'm pissed as hell. And then it would get you to go on again and start talking. So all this is designed. And again, how and what questions are designed from our perspective to engage you to help me get you out. What happened? How do you think we can resolve this today? It seems to me like you want to come out safely. And I want to make sure that happens for you. So it's things like that.
I love that. I want to go back into like mirroring, asking a mirror question. Typically, when you do this, do you see them like opening up quite a bit after that? Like, what is like your typical kind of, whether it's a verbal response or just kind of rapport, like when you nail a good mirror question, what are some typical things that you observe?
They'll talk more, or they'll get really uncomfortable and they'll hang up on you. And that's okay.
Why do they do that?
because they realize that. So you're starting to build that trust. You're starting to have a relationship with them. Ooh, wait a minute. Ooh, that's uncomfortable.
Is it a sense of fear?
Yeah, it's they're uncomfortable with what I've just said. They're uncomfortable. Yeah, he gets me. He understands me. Ooh, I don't like that. I've got to think about what I want to do. I got to think about, and it's okay, because we'll give them a minute or two and then we'll call them back.
Yeah.
And that, so yes, so either it gets them to talk a lot more. I remember there was a bank robbery suspect. There were several suspects, and they were mirroring, and the guy got uncomfortable, and he gave the phone to one of his other bank robbing buddies. He's like, no, this is, I've got to get distance. I can't be this close to this. And so either hanging up gets that distance, or giving the phone to somebody else and letting them talk. Sometimes they'll here, and they'll put it to the hostage's head and be like, say something, tell me you're okay.
Mm.
Again, that's creating distance for them, because now we're starting to get, a relationship, and they're uncomfortable with that,
Yeah.
Because you're not going to hurt somebody. I want this to resolve peacefully. You want to think you're in charge, and I'll let you think you're in charge all day long. But by me asking you what and how questions, I'm engaging you to help me get you out.
There's a lot right there that I want to touch up on that relates massively to what we do. So the first thing is going back to the mirroring. And like you said, that's why I wanted to ask was like, okay, what are your typical responses? They either open up or they shut down. Most of the time, they probably open up. And that's the thing, like why a mirror question works so well is because when you give somebody a subject to talk about, they're going to talk about it. Now, when you give somebody a subject that has to do with them, people like to talk about themselves naturally, especially if you have that trust or that fairness rapport, then they do feel a bit more comfortable. And what I found in sales is like, if somebody is comfortable, then naturally they'll feel more confident. And it goes either way. If someone feels more confident, then that means they have comfort, whether it's confident in what you do will help them or confident that you can walk them across the sale. Like in order to close somebody, you need them to be comfortable, but you need them to be confident that you can get them the result, that they believe that the result will help them and that they have the resources to do so. Right. But going back to the mirroring, it's like if you give somebody a subject to talk about and that it's personal enough, like they will naturally kind of open up for the most part. And we've done this in regular communications outside of sales or hostage negotiations, right? Like if someone's frustrated, it seems like you're like a bit, I don't know, is frustrated the right word? Yeah, I am fucking frustrated because my girlfriend cheated on me. Like, how could she do that after all I do for her? Right. And like, that's a mirror. That's a label, but it goes back tenfold just because of that. Now, the other thing that you mentioned too was like that fairness, that rapport, like being on the same side of the table, but almost as if like they feel like the ball is in their court. That's what's really important, because I have the same thing in my sales process. I want them to feel comfortable the whole time. So I ask a lot of open-ended questions. For example, like let's say I want to close somebody. I'll confirm the program, confirm the price, make sure it works for them. So what do you feel like we should do from here, Terry? I don't know. What the next step looks like? Well, I mean, like if you're open for it, I'll pull up my screen. I'll share the transaction with you. We'll put your favorite credit card in, like whatever. And then I'll send you over the agreement. You'll sign that, and then I'll get you booked in with your health coach or whatever it is. But you tell me, is that something like you're open to doing, or what do you feel like we should do? Like, no matter how you word structure it, what I've found is if I can put the ball in their court, it makes them feel more comfortable and confident of that situation or of that conversation, which they could think more clearly. They don't have anxiety. The trust is there because you're on the same side of the table. So that was something that I just realized that you do very well. And I thought that was quite funny. Man, I knew you were having a good conversation, Terry.
Let me throw this out again. But I also think what you just said from a sales perspective, it also, by you saying what you just said, it also allows them especially when you talked about, look, I want this to be fair. If there are impediments, you kind of get the soft yes, and it's like, is that really a yes? Are they really going to give me my credit card? Are they really going to sign, are they really going to make this deal, whatever it is? But it also allows you, by saying, hey, I think we can do this. If there's objections, if there's something that they don't feel good about, if there's something that, is kind of sticking in their craw, it's like, yeah, I don't know if I'm getting a good deal here. And they're a little uncomfortable saying, hey, Enrique, am I really getting a good deal here? They'll start to come up with reasons why they don't want to give you the credit card, or why, and then that allows you as the salesperson to say, to basically, oh, you're a little uncomfortable with it. Well, let's talk through that. Let's talk about how we implement this. Let's talk about what you gain from this. Let's talk about, and so you basically, it gives you an opportunity for them to pull it out, put it out there, and then you to address each of those things that would basically say a soft yes would turn a soft yes into an absolute yes. Yes, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do it right now, because now you've given them opportunity to voice their objections. They feel like they've been treated fairly. You've handled all their objections. Boom. Let's sign on the dotted line.
Oh man, I love this. We're geeking out right now. So you're talking about pre-handling objections, which is something that I like to coach too. And a lot of people are like, wait, you could pre-handle objections? It's like, how do you do that? It's like, well, yeah, if you know how to do it, like, you could do it. Let's go back into what you were talking about, like as far as like your process goes. So top of the call, you get the name, you set your pre-frame, you have the conversation, you get a little bit of trust. And then, so let's go back to where we were before, where you were explaining, right? So basically, maybe we could even tie into it, because I don't know, bring me to like the middle part of your process, if you will, the middle part or after that.
Well, I think a lot of it depends on kind of the intel we're gathering. So, again, we're asking open-ended questions.
Yeah.
We're parroting or mirroring what they're saying. We're attaching an emotion to it, labeling. It seems like you feel that you want to, whatever, whatever that ends up being. And then it's like, I mean, like I said, there were a lot of times we're talking about something over here, we're going through the process, but that has absolutely nothing to do with why we're here. And so then you get to a point where, maybe they hang up on you. Maybe they, decide to take the conversation in a different direction. It's like, oh, that's why we're here. That's what, and so you basically start over again in that rabbit hole. It's like, oh, okay, you think they're pissed off at their mother, but really they had a fight with their mother, but it was about something that their father did. And the real issue is with their father, because their father beats them. Now we've gone from you're mad at your mother to no, my father beats me. Well, that's what the problem is. All right, let's talk about that. You seem like you're a person that you want to protect you and your mother, don't you? Yeah, because and then boom, then they start down that rabbit hole. Now we know why we're here. Okay, so we get to that point. A lot of times, we get credit for talking people out. What we really do, and I think the same thing is true. Any good salesman, I think, is better at this than the people who just talk. You listen people out. You listen for what they say. You listen for what's he saying or what she's, the problem's with the mother. But if the dad keeps coming up in the conversation with the mother, maybe the problem isn't with the mother. Maybe it's with the dad.
And you know what, too? It's like, you can never assume.
Right.
Which is why it's like clearing like a hallway, right? Like military or whatever, SWAT, for example. Like they're going to look through each door, see if anything's back there, right? Each door in the hallway, they're going to check it out, make sure it's clear. It's the same thing. We can never assume, especially in a high stakes conversation, like a hostage negotiation. How could you assume if there's a lot at stake?
Right.
And I want to, this is so good. The only time you can kind of semi-assume maybe is like a mislabel, right? But even a mislabel is calculated at that for the most part. Right now, Did you ever dapper in mislabels, or did you kind of stray away from that?
Well, again, it depends on what you know and what you don't know. And
sure.
And especially with people, let's face it, some of these things are, this is life and death. And, I always just tell people about 85 to 90% of the time, we were successful in getting the person out safely. But about 10% of the time, like I said, if we've got you surrounded and I'm talking to you and you're a homicide suspect and you did it, and this is your third strike, and you're going to prison for the rest of your life, you've got a gun, you got the option to take yourself out. And about 10% of the time, people did that. They're like, no, no matter what you say, I'm not coming out. It's never going to, and you would just keep trying the same techniques over and over again. Now, I'll give you one example. We had a 15-year-old kid we were negotiating with. And a lot of this stuff you and I are talking about for a 15-year-old kid is useless because they don't get it. They don't get the psychology. They don't understand. I'm not going to say they don't understand trust. They do understand trust, but a lot of these things, they work on adults. Sometimes they don't work on kids. So we had done everything we could. We couldn't get this kid out. So we're like, okay, we called a timeout. We're like, hey, look, we need a break. We're going to call you back. Is that okay? Yeah, sure. That's fine. Kid hangs up. So we get together and we're like, I don't know what to do. We're kind of at a loss. And somebody said, he's a kid. Let's scare him. So we had the tactical team break a window and throw in a flashbang device, which all it does is it kind of goes off and it creates a loud sound and a bright light. And we're like, yeah, let's scare the kids, see what happens. We tried everything else. Let's see if this will work. So we did. We had tactical throw in a flashbang. Boom. Within 10 minutes, he was out. So, sometimes, yeah, I want to say this stuff works and it works. It works 95% of the time, but sometimes it just flat out doesn't work. But I think the best salespeople are the best listeners, not necessarily the best talkers. Would you agree?
100%. I think that a salesperson should really only speak maybe 30% of the time. Like it's all about the questions that you ask, but more importantly, the intention of the question that you're asking, because you want to have the outcome. Like you don't want to ask just mindless questions, because what is that? How is that going to serve you? How is that going to serve them? Because in a sales call, it's like when you hop on with me, Terry, it's like, I don't even know if I can help you yet. And that's the first thing I got to figure out is like, what's the problem? All right. How long have you had that problem for? Has that problem had any impact or effect on you? If so, like, what does that look like? And then I want to figure out, like, what are some things that you've tried in the past to try to fix that problem, Terry? But why didn't it work for you? Because I want to know why it didn't work for them. Is it because of them? Was it they had a bad mindset at the time? They couldn't be consistent, or they were too scared, like fear of commitment, fear of failure. Like these are pre-handling objections, mindset objections. Think about objections. Was it money, resources? Can I pre-handle money objection? Was it spouse, partner? I could pre-handle those objections. Or maybe was it nothing to do with them? Maybe they just got scammed. Was it a bad product or service? And that's a different objection in and of itself that I have to handle. So it's just figuring out like, what's the problem and how can I fix it? What have you tried in the past? And then like, yes, you're building rapport through the questions that you ask, if you ask good questions, but more importantly, when you're listening close to the solutions that they want, I'm going to build confidence behind that thing that they believe will get them the result that they want. Because when I can build that confidence in the thing, yes, they're going to feel more confident that that will help them solve XYZ after all this time. And that's what I'm going to present to them as a solution. And when I do so in the right way, I become the obvious solution. And when I'm in my presentation, I want to give them the feeling of, oh my God, this is what I need to solve XYZ. So that's kind of like what my sales process looks like in a nutshell, but it always goes back to the same conversation, full circle. I can't assume, number one, I have to always clarify. Even if I have to pump the brakes, take a step back, spend a little bit more time in a certain place to see if there's anything else to like any more to that truth or figure out what the real problem is, like I got to do that. And then I got to figure out if I can obviously help the person and then just go from there. But well, what are your thoughts on that? Is there
no, you're absolutely right. And I think a lot of it, when I said when we start negotiating, the person's they're ranting and raving, yelling and screaming and like that. And there's a tendency, to sort of mimic the person. I mean, I'm sure you've seen people that, you're across the table and talking to somebody folds their arms. Well, then you fold your arms, or they cross their leg and you cross their leg. Well, if you do that and they don't realize you're doing that, that creates that trust, that creates that familiarity as well. So if somebody's ranting and raving and yelling and screaming, that's why we would kind of do the opposite and use that sort of late night DJ voice. Well, Enrique, seems like you're really upset now with your mom. You're damn right I'm upset. I'm just, and they go off 1,000,000 miles an hour. And you try to, you're trying to bring them down off of that emotional high. And eventually you get to a point. And a lot of times, they just wear themselves out. They're yelling and screaming, ranting and raving. Maybe they're drunk, maybe they're high, all that over hours. You just keep them talking. You keep mirroring them. You keep labeling. You just keep going on. And eventually they're just exhausted. I had one guy who's just, Terry, I just want to come out. I'm tired. Yeah, that's a great idea. I want you to come out, but I want you to come out safely. So let's do, because a lot of times in SWAT, and people didn't realize this, you've barricaded yourself in a room. We would tie the door off so that you couldn't just open the door and come out, because we might not be ready to deal with you. So we would actually tie the door off and be like, no, if you decided you wanted to come out, no, you're gonna do it the way we want you to do it. We're gonna do it safely so that none of us get hurt and you don't get hurt as well. So, hey, when you come out, and I would tell them, here's exactly what you're going to do. Here's exactly what's going to happen. You're going to come out, your hands are going to be up. People are going to tell you what to do. Just do what they tell you to do. If they tell you to get out on your knees, get out on your knees. If they tell you to lay flat on your stomach, lay flat on your stomach. And we'd go through this whole scenario so nobody got hurt coming out. But then I would always end it with, and you know what? When we've got you secured and you're safe, I'm going to come down to the scene and we're going to talk face to face. We're going to talk like men. Yeah, I'd really like that, Terry. Because I've developed that rapport. I've developed that trust with them.
Did you meet them?
Yeah.
Every time?
Most of the time. Yeah, I would go down to the scene and we would talk. I mean, I had one guy, and this was a totally atypical, never went this way, but this guy had barricaded himself in his house with his wife, and he was drunk. I got to the scene. I was the first officer on the scene, or first SWAT person on the scene. And I talked to the uniformed officer. What's the deal? It's like, he's drunk, barricaded himself in his house with his wife. Do you have him on the phone? Yes. Let me talk to him. So I start talking to him. And like I said, I told you, again, there are absolutes, but then you kind of throw the book out the window sometimes. And this was throw the book out the window. I talked to him for about 10 minutes. And I just had this feeling. And I said to him, what would it take for you to come out? Again, you never ask that. In the first couple hours, you never ask that. There was this long pause. He said, give me a beer. I said, if I gave you a beer, do I have your word you would come out? He said, do I have your word I could drink it? I said, you have my word, you can drink it. So I gave $5 to one of the officers. I said, get out of the store, buy a beer. Tactical team put it on the front porch. I called him back. I said, your beer's on the front porch, but you don't get it until your wife comes out. You put the gun down and you come out. He said, do I still have your word I could drink it? I said, absolutely, you have my word, you can drink it. All of a sudden, the front door flies open. His wife comes out with her hands up. He comes out with his hands up. We handcuff him, let him drink his beer, and off to jail he goes.
See that, ladies? See how simple us men are. Just give us some beer. It would have been.
Give me a beer. We'll end this.
You should probably cut the alcohol. He's like deficit on carbs, and.
but see, that was the other thing. We never gave somebody anything without getting something. So somebody be like, I want a cigarette. All right, we'll give you a cigarette. What are you going to give us? What do you want? How about your gun? I'm not giving you my gun.
Now, why do you do that?
How about a magazine out of your gun? All right, I'll give you a magazine. So we would never give something without getting something in return.
Why?
Partially because we didn't, it was like, we're creating a relationship. We're creating trust. If you give me something, I will give you something. Okay, fine. If you, no, I'm in control. Okay, yeah, you're in control. I can't do it. I can't do it. So, I can do it. Here's what I can do for you. Here's how I can help you. Give me a bullet. I'll give you a cigarette. Give me a bullet. All right, I can do that. I'll give you a bullet.
Even just something, even just a small little step forward like that.
Yeah, we're developing a relationship both ways.
It's like every drop.
Trust you. You got to trust me.
Every drop counts in the bucket.
It does.
Especially in a high stakes like that. So look, I want to go back. So like you met most of these people. What was that like? Like, I'm just trying to picture it in my mind in like a cinematic way. Like, all right, you just had probably a couple hour long conversation, high stakes, whatever the case was. And now you're actually going to meet this person. Are you a bit worried that you're going to show them your face or no?
No. I told you earlier, we never lied to people, and people are, well, why not? Why didn't you use deceit and stuff like that? And the reason we didn't, because there was a very good chance. And this happened where a year from now or 2 years from now, we're back negotiating with the same person all over again. And if they ever felt it's like, Tucker, you lied to me the last time you talked. Well, you know what? You're going to have to bring in another negotiator, because I have totally lost any ability to have a trusting relationship with this person. So we would never lie to them. They may not like what we said. Again, I want a cigarette. Give me a cigarette. Give me a car. Give me a car, or I'm going to, and that was the other thing, give me a car in 10 minutes or I'm going to kill one of the hostages. 99% of the time, deadlines are just them trying to exercise control. So we would just play right through deadlines. And, like if the deadline was coming up, say 30 seconds before the deadline, and they hadn't called us or we weren't talking to them, we'd call them, the phone rang. What? And then we'd ask them a question or something like that. And the deadline had passed. And now they're not going to do anything because, well, they'll set another deadline and stuff like that. So again, I want a car. You want a car. You want to be safe. That's right. You want to get out of this. Yeah, I want to get a car. I want to get out of here. I don't want to be here anymore. Exactly. You want to be safe. And that's what I want for you. How can we make that happen? Now I've engaged them to help me get them out. How can we make that happen?
So when you were, I'm still stuck on this, but when you were talking to these people, I guess, like, I don't know, like what was that like? Like, walk us through like kind of what that conversation or what that moment kind of looked like.
I think the thing you've got to remember, and I think maybe where you're having the hang up is, you have to understand, you have to personalize these people. I don't care if this guy, again, this is a homicide suspect who's killed 15 kids in a school, and he's holed up in an apartment building. What he did was heinous? Absolutely. Should he be whatever you feel he should be? Yes, absolutely. But I can't let that judgment color my ability to engage with this person as another human being. So, you're the scum of the earth. You raped 50 women. It's like, yes. And the Justice Department, the justice system will deal with that with you. That's not my job. I am not the judge. I am not the jury. My job is to get you out as safely as possible. That's what I want. That's my ultimate goal. And if I have to, I've got to relate with you as a human being. And if I can't do that, we don't develop trust. We don't develop trust, you're not going to do anything I ask you to do to come out. So it's hard sometimes. It's hard to take some of these callous, hard criminals and realize that somewhere there's a human being that loves them. Their mother, their kid, somebody loves that human being. And that's what I used to use as my perspective, that this is a human being who's done some horrible things, but my job is to get them out safely. And somewhere, somebody loves this person. That made them more human to me and allowed me to kind of say, yeah, this guy's a scum. And I hope he dies in a hail of bullets. No, that's not my job.
Interesting. Yeah, no, it's always a different perspective.
It is.
Has anyone ever been like thankful? Like, has anyone ever think like, hey, thank you, like for pulling me out of that situation, or like, I don't know, like what is that conversation usually composed of though? Like when they come out, they're detained. Like, what the hell do you say? Like, hey, I'm Terry. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, I'm like, hey, I'm Terry. Oh, Terry, a lot of times it was there because I mean, most people don't want to die. And I mean, let's face it, if your residence, if your house, if your apartment building is surrounded by the police and you're talking to me, you're probably having the worst day of your life up to this point. So, you get to a point where I don't really want to die, but I don't know how to get myself out of this situation. That's where I come in. I'm going to help you get out of this situation safely. And then when you do that, there's sort of that decompression. Yeah, I know I'm in handcuffs. Yeah, I know I'm going to jail, or I'm going to the hospital for mental health treatment, whatever it ends up being. But there was a person on the end of that line that was my lifeline. That person helped me out. So it wasn't like, Tucker, you're an ass, or, I can't believe. No, it was more gratitude on their part that I got them to a point where they were going to live to see another day.
Mm. It's interesting. It's like your positioning throughout the whole thing and like the outcome. It's like you kind of come out as like this divine light, like this like this angel, right? Where it's like Terry, there you are.
Yeah, because I mean, a lot of them don't know how they got themselves into this situation, and they sure as heck don't know how to get themselves out of it.
Yeah.
And so that's, like I said, that's where we're trying to do our job. I mean, there are certainly the people that they would never talk to us. They would never pick up the phone. They would never talk to us. And the tactical team would have to go in, they'd throw gas wouldn't work. They'd have to go in, and sometimes, shots would be fired and stuff like that. They might have to shoot and kill the guy. The guy may have already killed himself. There were a lot of times where the person had already killed themselves before we ever got on scene and, surrounded the place and set up and were ready to go. They'd killed themselves an hour ago. We'd spend 2 hours, letting the phone ring or going over the PA, hey, John, pick up the phone. Come on, we want to talk to you. Just come to the window and talk to me. Just yell out. We go on for. You felt like an idiot because you weren't talking to anybody. You were just making these gestures. Or the guy had killed himself 2 hours ago, and eventually the decision was made. The tactical team was going to have to go in and sweep the apartment or sweep the house, and he's dead.
So this kind of goes back to like the conversation of assumption, but based on the conversation that you had in those scenarios, like, were you ever able to kind of prejudge or have like a gut feeling of like, okay, I don't know if this is going to pan out how we want it, or this guy is giving me like indicators, or this guy might be like a suicidal guy, or this guy might be like worst case scenario? Like, were you ever able to kind of like prejudge, or you just straight up never know?
I tried never to prejudge. Again, I am focused on trying to get this person to interact with me, trying to get them, to come out safely.
Yeah.
As I said, there was a secondary that was sitting beside me, kind of listening to it. And it's like, okay, yeah, we're hearing this. And a lot of times our commander, who was a captain or a lieutenant, is also listening, and there would be a time where you would get a note, do you think he's going to come out? And sometimes you would say, we've been doing this for 4 hours. And sometimes, I'd have to write on the note, no, which meant, okay, now we've got to make the tactical team go in there and get them.
I see.
That didn't happen a lot. Like I said, they didn't know how they got themselves in this situation. They were looking for somebody to get them out of it. That was me. But again, sometimes it was like, hell no, I'm not coming out. The only way I'm coming out is you're going to have to come in and get me. Okay, we can do that too.
I want to, I could talk forever about this with you, man. It's a good thing we're not at a bar drinking a couple beers.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll be there till it closes. Yeah, another platter of nachos, please, over here. Do you, man, I want to wrap up, unfortunately, but like, do you have any, I don't know, was like a particular time or a particular event or a particular hostage, I don't know what the right term is, but a particular person that kind of like you'll never forget that you had a conversation with?
Yeah, I do. This guy was one of those people you just described. He was suicidal. He had tried to kill himself twice at this point in time. First, he tried to slit his wrist, and this probably started 8, 9 o'clock at night. Tried to slit his wrist. That didn't work. Somehow he got the brilliant idea to turn the gas on his oven and stick his head in the oven and somehow think that was going to kill him. That didn't work either. So he made these 2 failed attempts. And then he called a family member, and the family member was smart enough to call us. And so we have now surrounded his house, and he had a gun now. He's going to kill himself. And this was probably 3-4 o'clock in the morning. And this was a guy who I think I wore him down. I'm tired. This has been going on for hours. I've tried all this. This isn't working. I don't really want to kill myself, I don't think, but help me out. How do I get out of this? So he says to me, Terry, I'm exhausted. I just want to come out. So we go through the whole, here's how we want you to come out. Here's what we want you to do. Put the gun down, take the phone with you. Don't hang up the phone. He hangs up the phone, which is not uncommon because we're conditioned. When a call is over, we hang up the phone. Probably about 10 seconds later, one of the tactical officers comes on the radio and says, we heard a gunshot. You gotta be kidding me. This guy shot himself. He did, shot himself in the head. Shot himself, though, at an angle where the bullet went in underneath his skin at his temple here, around his scalp, and came out the other side. Never penetrated his scalp, never got to his brain.
What kind of caliber? What?
I have no idea. It was just the angle that the bullet, your skull is pretty hard.
Yeah.
And so it just went in at an angle wherever he had it, where the bullet went around his scalp and came out the other side. Incredibly bloody, because head wounds are incredibly bloody. Even you get punched in the nose or whatever. I mean, just blood all over the place, but not serious at all. Obviously, I did not talk to him. He went to the hospital.
That guy is like walking bad luck. I mean,
well, that's a guy who, I've tried 3 times to kill myself. That's God saying, not your time.
Yeah, evidently so. But holy shit. I mean, you go to shoot yourself in the head, and it makes it's the shot heard around the world, literally goes around his skull. And it comes out. That is
crazy.
Man, that's
crazy.
It's freaky, yeah.
Not your time. When it's your time, and nothing you can do about it. But when it's not your time, nothing you can do about that either.
That's something.
Yeah.
Well, Terry, it was a pleasure, man. I mean, do you have any closing statements, any closing questions, anything? Because, dude, if I keep talking, we're going to keep going.
Well, no, I'll just, a couple things. And you probably tell your salespeople like that. If you're on the phone with somebody and you're engaged in sales, smile. Smile. And if you don't know what to do, smile. And not in a smirk. I'm not telling you to smirk, because people look, but just smile, be genuine, be open, just be like, look, we want fairness. We want a good deal for both of us. If you get that, then at the end of the day, again, sales, nobody dies. And what we did, people died. And so you realize you do the best you can. And people always ask me, well, how'd you feel when somebody decided to end their life? And I don't mean to be callous about this, but I never lost any sleep over it. And the reason I didn't was because 1, I worked with great people. 2, I had great training. And 3, I knew I did everything I possibly could to get this person out alive. It was their decision whether they wanted to take their life or not my decision. And so when they did that, I slept just fine. Yes, it was tragic because, like I said, that person had somebody that loved them somewhere, and now their life is over. And so, just be genuine with people, smile, and always try to treat people fairly. You do that, I think, in any negotiation, in any relationship, husband and wife, boss, subordinate, parent, child, you're going to have a pretty good relationship.
Damn it, Terry, I got to comment on that too, because you just hit home, man. In a sales conversation, let's say I can't close them. I go through multiple loops of objection handling, multiple objections, whatever. That's how I said all in the call too. It's hey, look, I totally get where you're at. The reason why I've been not persistent, but kind of open to having the conversation with you for this long is because I just want to make sure that you're in the best position possible to finally be able to do X, Y, Z. And if I wasn't able to help you out with that, that's on me. And thank you for showing that to me, because now I know, after I reflect on this conversation, how I can be better. Having those kind of conversations or positioning in a way like that, where it's hey, everything, all cards on the table, totally get it. Thank you. Boom. That holds tenfold, because a lot of the times on sales calls, it's like, you know what? You're right. This is something that I should probably do. Man, I had a blast with you, Terry. This was good. This was really
Enrique, thanks for having me. Hopefully we gave some information to some of the people listening to you, and we can make their lives better.
100%. I think we got to have you back on and maybe focus on specific, maybe like questions or something like that, different angles. I'm sure you can give a lot of perspective and tips like that. But folks, there you have it. I told you this is going to be one hell of a podcast guest. So this was Terry Tucker. Terry, thank you, brother.
Thank you, Enrique.